My daughter asked me where nightmares come from. I told her the story my father told me and his father told him. Long ago, there were no nightmares, only memories. Memories of the things that men do and the things men see. Then sometime around the 5th century, during the migration of Germanic tribes into what would become most of Western Europe, there was a lord, and like many lords of the time, he acquired land. He acquired this land the way everyone acquired land then. He conquered it. It was in the aftermath of a particularly brutal battle, near the edges of a deep crevasse, that the Lord found a pale child wandering among the littered corpses. It was a girl, blackened by smoke and stained with the spattered blood of the fallen. She had dark eyes and a misshapen body with deformities that made even the bravest soldiers avoid her gaze and step from her path. Now this Lord was a generous one, loved by his men and his people, and he felt pity for this impish girl, and he took her in, raising her within the confines of his castle. He named the girl Nocturne for her dark eyes and her peculiar habit of avoiding sleep and staying up late into the night, seemingly for days and weeks at a time. Despite her appearance, Nocturne soon showed a jester's talent for making the Lord and the neighboring aristocracy laugh and enjoy themselves at her stories, tales, and tricks. This Lord also had a handsome son, a prince who would one day inherit the throne, the castle, and its lands. The prince, like the others, enjoyed the antics of this little girl who was always by his father's side, telling stories and riddles to delight the crowd. But each night, the prince would watch as Nocturne would whisper into the Lord's ear at day's end, leaving the prince to question this girl jester, and the way his father seemed so enthralled by such a grotesque and deformed comedian who never seemed to sleep. Soon, the prince was of age, and he prepared to leave the castle for his studies. He embraced his father tightly, knowing they would not see each other for years. As he rode away, leaving the only home he knew for the very first time, he glanced back at the castle and the people surrounding his waving father. The last thing he saw before the castle slipped from view was Nocturne, there at his father's side, whispering her whispers in his ear. The stories reached the prince in the final year of his schooling. They seemed fantastical at first, claiming that his father had become a monster, a bane to his very land. It seemed the Lord had begun taxing his people harshly and imprisoning any who could not pay, condemning them to the bowels of the castle to await some form of trial and eventually a horrible death. There were tales of lavish, sin-fueled parties where the Lord would fly into rages at others, often baiting guests into heated debates, only to shackle them in chains for disobeying his view or command. Neighboring lords and landowners avoided the castle, fearing the tales of torture and staying clear of the screams that lasted well into the night. And within each chilling account, what each witness never ceased to mention was that the girl Nocturne was there, with her strange whispers for only the Lord's ear. It seemed that Nocturne was either immune to the Duke's blood rage, or the very cause of it. Now, with this madness consuming his father, the prince was told that neighboring lords were preparing to siege the castle and divide its lands among them. As the prince rode quickly for home, he knew that any such battle would be short, since recent tales told that much of the castle had been abandoned, and now only the Lord and Nocturne lived within its bloodied walls. As the prince neared the castle, he galloped past the villages he remembered as a young man. Once vibrant and alive, they were now shells of towns, filled with the starving, the desperate, and the dead. The castle road was littered with bloated corpses, and the creek he once played in as a boy ran red with blood. The prince burst into the castle, sword drawn, and called for his father. From a splintered bench in the corner of the throne room, the lord's feeble voice replied. The prince's father was now thin, with sunken eyes and trembling hands, but he stood feebly and reached longingly for his son. The prince embraced his father and asked if the stories were true. The lord nodded, shame washing over his pale face. Gripping his sword tight, the prince roared for Nocturne, vowing to end this damnable reign of madness. She appeared behind him, whispering a welcome to the prince. She was seated on the lord's throne, her small, crooked body dwarfed by the immense gilded chair. The prince lunged at Nocturne, but his sword was halted inches from her throat by the call of his father, who cried, "No!" In labored gasps, the weak lord told his son that Nocturne was no girl, but a witch raised from hell that day on the battlefield. It was her whispers, her foul and tiny voice in his ear that spread the madness, a rain of nightly tales of horror that he would in turn make real by day. The Lord said he kept Nocturne here in the castle, fearing that her tales, should they spread through the land, would inflict the very same horrors that happened here at his home. With this, the Lord gripped his son's hand, looked to Nocturne's black eyes, and let out his last cold breath. The prince's eyes filled with tears, seeing his dead father. As for Nocturne, she laughed. It was a tiny laugh, but a laugh that filled the prince with rage. He stood and stared into the eyes of that small witch, and in one swift motion, sank his sword through her down to its hilt. Nocturne's laugh went silent, and her eyes bulged black. Dark blood seeped from her stunted mouth. A watery, bubbling sound crept up from deep within her, traveling up her throat and past her bloodied lips. It was one last whisper, an evil sound that echoed throughout the castle, past its gates, past its lands, and rang out into our world. Years went by, and the prince was eventually killed in battle, and the castle was divided among the aristocracy. The tale of Nocturne, the lord, and the prince was almost lost to time and the long shadows of a growing and aging Europe. But some still share the tale of the sleepless Nocturne, the girl who was something not human, a creature beyond the grip of sleep, or night, or day. For what the king said that day to his son was true. When Nocturne was killed, she was released into the ether and sent adrift into our world. She is now free to whisper to more than just one old lord. Her whispered stories and tales and riddles can now reach us all while we sleep. Gone are the kings, dukes, and lands of old. Now there are factories, industry, automobiles, and airplanes. But Nocturne remains, creeping silently into the bedrooms of men, of women, and especially of children. As she did with that long-dead lord, she whispers into your ear while you sleep and breathes vile tales of terror, of dread, and the drip, drip, drip of human poisons she has witnessed on this earth. Maybe she'll whisper in your ear, or maybe she already has, because like I told my daughter, she is where nightmares come from. Subject is a 5-year veteran of the Vietnam conflict, highly trained, extremely dangerous, dishonorably discharged on allegations of war crimes, but never convicted by military tribunal due to advanced psychotic state. Since internment at redacted psychiatric hospital, and following his procurement and admission into the program, subject refuses to acknowledge present situation or past indiscretions, instead choosing to believe that he never left Vietnam and that on-site staff are communist sympathizers out to coerce sensitive information from him. Patient 22. Let go of me, you slope-loving bastards. I've killed 100 before you, and I'll take you down just the same. Get the fuck off. Note. Subject is restrained. In chair. Doctor. Don, please. Nobody's going to hurt you. It's all right. Patient 22. Bullshit. You don't fool me for a second. I've been out there in that fucking jungle, hell, for as long as I can remember. You think I don't know a commie when I see one? I'm a fucking Marine, you traitor piece of shit. Wipe that goddamn smile off your face before I smack it off. Note. Subject begins to tense violently against restraints, grunting in an attempt to free himself. Doctor. Hang on, Sergeant. I wasn't laughing at you, all right? I wasn't. Please, will you let me explain for a second? Note. Subject seems to calm down somewhat, glaring, seething, writhing against restraints subtly in an effort to loosen them. Doctor. Now, I know that you spent a hell of a long time out there, and God knows that you did your country proud. I just want you to know that you don't have anything to worry about here. You aren't in Da Nang. In fact, you aren't even in Vietnam anymore. You're home, Sergeant, in the United States. Note. Subject seems to take this in for a moment, in a way previous attempts at reaching him did not. However, just as quickly, his face reverts back to the same stony affect that he entered the room with. Patient 22. That isn't possible. Doctor. Think about it, Sergeant. The Viet Cong could never corrupt as many red-blooded Americans as you've seen just on your way down the hallway from your room, right? Never mind since. Well, tell me, have you seen one foreign face since you arrived here last week? Where are the communist comm centers? Where's the number stations? The bamboo cages, the torture? There's none of that here. Because you aren't there, Sergeant. You're here. You made it out alive. And in one piece to boot. That's more than can be said for lots of men who didn't. Patient 22. What the fuck would you know about who made it back and who didn't? Doctor. I never meant to say. Patient 22. You said enough. If we aren't in Nam anymore, then I want to talk to my goddamn CO. Get redacted on the horn. Have him tell me that it's the God's honest truth that the bastard pulled me out just when the fighting was getting good. We almost had him. We pushed those bush monkeys back into the jungle. Are you saying he would do that? Are you questioning Redacted's competency? Doctor, the fight is over, Sergeant. The President called it. In fact, it's been over for quite a while now. 3 whole years, to be precise. Note, subject is quiet, almost shaken. After a long moment, he looks up from the floor at Dr. Redacted, smiling. Patient 22. Who's the President? If it's been 3 fucking years, then who is he? Huh? Tell me. Doctor, it's Carter. It's Jimmy Carter. Note, subject suddenly erupts from chair and lunges across desk towards Dr. Redacted, tackling him before he can press panic button. Patient 22. You smug little bastard. I'll tear your goddamn heart out so all the conspirators can see what a fucking coward you are. They would never pull us out. You hear me? Never. Doctor, please, stop. Patient 22. Shut the fuck up. Note, subject begins beating Dr. Redacted's skull with his fist, while holding it by the hair in the other, is deceased by the time orderlies enter the room. Patient 22. Come on, you freedom-hating fucks. I'll take all of you, right here. Come on. Note, subject is tased by a stun gun after mortally wounding orderly, Redacted, with a glass ashtray and using the broken remains to injure another. Tape runs for further 7 minutes, mostly unintelligible due to the commotion, as facility personnel go about removing Dr. Redacted's corpse following paramedics' evacuation of the wounded. Unknown. Jesus. What a fucking mess. On my first day as a train conductor, I received a daunting list of rules from my colleague, David, the bartender on board. As I glanced over the list, his words echoed in my mind. Read them carefully before you start your shift. It's not a joke. Little did I know how true those words would ring. As the train pulled into the station, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The train loomed large and foreboding, its dark exterior giving me a sense of foreboding. But I brushed it off as nerves and stepped onto the platform, ready to begin my new job. Hello, I'm a bit early. The train isn't here yet, is it? I greeted my boss, eager to make a good impression. It hasn't arrived, but I hope it doesn't keep us waiting too long, he replied, gesturing towards a tall man standing nearby. You can chat with your colleague over there while you wait. The tall man introduced himself as David, the bartender on the train. Moments later, the train arrived, and David handed me a paper with a serious expression. The thanks, I stammered, taken aback by his intensity. Once aboard, I unfolded the paper to find a list of rules that sent shivers down my spine. Rules for surviving this train trip, it read ominously. The instructions were bizarre and unsettling, warning me about fake passengers and advising me to hide in the bathroom if I saw another conductor. This has to be a joke, I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the creeping sense of dread. But as I began my shift, strange things started happening. A foul smell permeated the air, seemingly emanating from a mysterious passenger dressed in black. When a mother complained about the smell, I hesitated, torn between following the rules and addressing the issue. As I approached the mysterious passenger, I felt a chill run down my spine. His eyes seemed to pierce through me, and I quickly averted my gaze, following the rules despite my instincts telling me otherwise. But the situation only grew more bizarre. The passenger began tapping on my shoulder, each tap growing more insistent and unnerving. I panicked, unsure of what to do, and hastily retreated to the safety of the bathroom. As I sat there, trying to gather my thoughts, I realized I was in over my head. The rules David had given me felt like a lifeline, but they offered little comfort in the face of such bizarre circumstances. With each passing minute, the sense of dread only intensified, and when someone began banging on the bathroom door, I knew I was running out of time. If you find this message, please tell my family I love them, and pray that I make it out of this train alive.